Hi there, I'm Dan Dawkins from Games Radar, and I'm here to talk about the slightly wild and baffling new trailer shown for Death Stranding just last night. Now think of this as more of a reaction piece than a super hardcore analysis. I think to do that properly would take weeks, but I've been following this game since its very inception, and I think there's a much bigger picture at play than perhaps a lot of people have been able to piece together so far. Now, for students of Kojima's work, you always have to start at the very beginning, and quite often he hides his biggest secrets in plain sight at the start of a campaign. He did exactly the same thing with MGS5, with the exposing the theme of identity and the bandaged man, and what eventually turned out to be MGS5's big reveal. Now, I think in Death Stranding, he's played his hand incredibly early, and I think there's some things we need to consider right from the off. The biggest, most obvious clue is the name of the game, Death Stranding. Now, stranding is the concept, as we've seen, of the whale, like trapped on the beach, stranded between two worlds. Now, in Death Stranding is the concept of literally death itself being stranded. And this has been corroborated by Kojima himself. So when the game was first announced, he said, "From the days of coin-operated games, we've had a continue option if you were to fail at your mission. Failing would also mean the death of your game character. In making a game, both in story and in game system, you depict death. However, death is about to have a new meaning." Now there's your first killer clue, which we'll tie up right now. The second huge clue is from the first sighting we had of the Kojima Productions website after he left Konami and went to work with Sony. That was like a sort of starry, constellation-based website, and it started with this text: "We are Homo Ludens, those who play. From the moment we enter this world, we instinctively invent ways to have fun and share our interactions with those around us. We are not asked to do this, nor do we need reasons to create. It is simply who we are. We find one another and compete with another. We laugh together and cry together, all while playing together. Our experiences bind us and liberate us. To share our most valuable experiences, we create stories, invent tools, and evolve the art of play. Play has been our ally since the dawn of civilization." Now you might think, why am I just reading this out? The important point to note is, I suspect Death Stranding is Hideo Kojima's most literal statement on the nature of the relationship between video game and player yet. Now, anyone who has studied Kojima's work thus far will know he was one of the first game developers to break the fourth wall, to invite us in Metal Gear Solid to put down the pad, to in Metal Gear Solid 5 effectively become the author of the script in the absence of Hideo Kojima / Big Boss from the story. Which could be a way to explain the repeated missions at the end of that game and Act 2, subject to debate, of course. Now, I think this game will most literally address what it is for us as Homo Ludens and players to interact with a universe of fictional characters. To continue with the statement from the website, he says, "Playing is not simply a pastime, it is the primordial basis of imagination and creation. Truth be told, Homo Ludens, those who play, are simultaneously Homo Faber, those who create. Even if the earth was stripped of life and reduced to a barren wasteland, our imagination desired to create would survive. Beyond survival, it would provide hope that flowers, and it may one day bloom again. Through the invention of play, our new evolution awaits. We are Homo Ludens, we are those who play." Now again, there's some obvious references there to the imagery we see in Death Stranding of essentially devastation, world in turmoil. It's almost like environmental collapse. Let's take that further. The second Death Stranding trailer we saw, and that was in fact a year ago, references William Blake's Auguries of Innocence. Now I won't read all that poem out, it's really, really long, but just to quote the first few lines: "To see a world in a grain of sand and a heaven in a wild flower, hold infinity in the palm of your hand and eternity in an hour." Now, the entire poem is about essentially the interconnectedness of the world and our dependencies on each other. And essentially, it's a fable of dangers of environmental ruin and how very small things can have very large ripple effects. We can tie this even further, where Hideo Kojima has gone on record talking about Death Stranding in the context of sticks and ropes, where sticks represent traditional game mechanics, which are guns, the way we interact and compete with each other, which all ties back in with that original Homo Ludens statement, or ropes, that which connects us, that which binds us, that which links nature, society, rules of physics, humanity. All the stuff we can see from the ropes in the game and from the Auguries of Innocence poem. So as mad as this sounds, my working thesis is that Death Stranding is Kojima's most literal / metaphorical comment on the nature of player and playing games, and you will see that echoed exactly throughout this new trailer. And it does almost touch on a theme of we, the player, controlling those literal characters in this universe. Now, the opening monologue of this trailer talks about the Big Bang being the defining event of our universe, and since then there has been essentially a new Big Bang which has changed everything. Now, it's also worth noting, again, tying to our themes of the auguries of innocence and William Blake's note of environmental destruction, notice how the flowers wither and fade as we move towards Redus's character. Now we can see Redus lying down. We know now this character's name is Sam. They appear to be in some kind of moon-style environment that suffered almost complete environmental collapse. It looks like almost like a scene from Prometheus, or maybe from Alien Covenant, which again would not be surprising given Hideo Kojima's love of cinema. Again, you follow his Twitter feed, you'll see exactly that. You'll also note that on his clothing it cites the name Porter. Now, Porter's interesting because I guess quite literally that means carrier, and Redus and his team are quite literally carriers of the babies in the pods, of which we'll talk more about as we go on. It's also worth noting Redus's character has what appears to be kind of a dream catcher attached to the back of his rig, which looks broken on his back. Now, again, I think that ties to a bigger sense of like spirituality, togetherness, and that cross between, I guess, physics and science versus what is God, that kind of stuff. I know that sounds wild, but just bear with me. Okay, now we can see this character on the floor. He's crushed, he's clearly in a lot of pain. He's trying to be helped up by one of his colleagues, and his colleague's little silver detector starts flashing. Now it seems pretty clear that these detectors indicate, I guess, the incoming presence of what we will refer to as like the Guardians or the Ludens in this universe, who are those sort of 5, it might be skull-faced spectral characters glimpsed in the very first trailer. Now as they get near, it looks like the guy on the floor is aging really rapidly, which is a weird thing to note, but we'll talk more about that now. This is an ultra-critical point. Look at the wrists of both characters. They have glowing wristbands. One of the characters' wristbands is blue, the other is red. Now, if you've ever held a DualShock 4 pad, you will be very familiar with the different colour states of the light bar. That's right, the colour states go from, blue, orange, red. Throughout this trailer, you will see players at different levels of physical distress displaying that through essentially a light bar colour. So when it's red, they're in trouble. When it's blue, they're healthy. Now, this will all tie around to the idea of Ludens in this universe, the 5 spectral characters, and essentially a sense of them taking control of the universe, and quite literally Redus and his team that we see. And so again, they are the Homo Ludens, those who play. Are they a cipher for us, the player, taking literal physical control of these characters within the game? Now, the handprints seem to be a recurring motif, though, in the first trailer, the second trailer, the third. This, I think, is a sense of, like, if you take this analogy to its full extreme, imagine that you're trying to connect to an online server, and it's almost like you're searching for players, searching for lobby, searching for connection. It's almost like these hands are clamouring to get hold of a character to seize control of, or to pull through to another side or dimension. Now, the character that Redus is looking over, the body, seems to be like almost embalmed, like they're transporting it from place to place. The face of the character appears to be like a gold skull. The skull is extremely redolent of, again, the Ludens character, or the mascot of Kojima Productions, who at this stage, it seems, there's a clear link between that and the spectral 5 figures. We see the character shake, there's some kind of material leaving its eyes. Again, it's almost like there's a transference of that body, or that cadaver being taken somewhere else. Now we get our first glimpse of, again, this sort of giant, almost like Stranger Things 2 style beast glowering over the universe. We'll see this more as we get later on, but this creature seems to be flowing with, again, cords, with ropes, with connections. This is almost like the puppet master of the universe that Redus and his characters now inhabit. Taking it to its extreme, it's us, the player. It's us searching for another go, another play, another continue. Is there a sense of when we're playing video games, imagine those characters we're controlling were actually real. As we see the character who's rapidly aged flailing, you can see again his light bar has gone to red. He's about to exit this sort of part of the universe. He's being dragged into the oil. His friend tries to kill him, but again, Death Stranding. He's not able to kill him, he's taken away by the oil before that can happen. Now the character who lands from the sky, and we can probably stand this up, displays extremely similar mannerisms to Mads Mikkelsen's character from the second trailer. The moving of the fingers to the lips and the shushing. And again we see, Mikkelsen's character able to control what like a series of, in the second trailer, characters on ropes, World War II soldiers. Now, I think Mads Mikkelsen's character is perhaps one of these Ludens, the person who can control those around him, much as we, the video game player, controls players or squads, or different things within our game universes. And again, note the way that the spinning rotor, the detector thing, seems to send a signal from Mads Mikkelsen's character, if we think that is him, to one of Redis's allies, and at the same time the baby awakes. It's almost like putting another 10p in the slot, like you're getting an extra life, or and you continue. And finally we see Redis' companion flipped upside down, almost being sucked, again, literally the use of the word upside down, to another universe. Could this be, again, representative of the player dragging like some avatar back into a game world? And he's trying to kill himself by stabbing, but it doesn't seem to have any effect. Interesting to note, he does eject his baby, and again, as a porter or carrier, he's passing on the mantle of holding the baby to someone else, and the baby again might represent all kinds of things, including almost like a sense of life force or regeneration. In a very literal sense, in computer games you do carry around extra lives. Now we get a good glimpse at the spectral, or a big Ludens style monster character. Threads going absolutely everywhere. We can see it's trying to interconnect with everything, dragging people into another universe. There's definitely the player and avatar style meaning. There's also a sense of these almost being divine beings that pull people across universes. And I think anyone who's listened to the analysis of the first trailer might be aware of the necklace that Redis wears, which contains references to physics equations such as the Dirac equation or the Schwarzschild radius, which are seen as immutable laws of physics that would connect the universe. There's definitely a sense of Redis being almost lost in time or across dimensions. And are the Ludens figures the ones that connect it all or pull it all together? We see Redis floating underwater. The key thing to note here is that he's not wearing those dangling necklaces, which might suggest this is, again, is it before, is it after the first trailer? He also doesn't seem to have the C-section scar, so it seems like a safer bet to say that, this is in fact before what we see later on, and that's made even more clear by the very weird sort of entry into his mouth and the glimpse of the thumbs up baby. Now in the floating detritus in the sea, you can see fellow soldiers, you can see ropes, you can see crabs. These are all objects we've seen in other trailers. Again, they're sort of being dragged, almost flipped, inverted between worlds. Notice the whale, like the whale was shown in a tech demo for Kojima Productions that at the time he'd said, that's nothing to do with my universe. He's lying. I think the mascot is clearly a part of Death Stranding. I think that the whale, even as a signifier, is something to look at. And again, if you really want to dial it back, the whale was in MGS5 for some really weird reason in one of the original Phantom Pain trailers. There's motifs at play here, and we're not just talking about connections between player and game. We're talking about connections between author and his previous works. Okay, a car with bridges floats by. We've seen the Bridges badge previously on Guillermo del Toro's character in the second trailer. We don't know much more about it. It says it's the United Cities of America. Again, taking this quite literally, bridges are obviously a connection, which could be related to the ropes, and porters are carriers. It could be like the people who carry the babies or the extra lives. We see the Dreamcatcher floating by. And finally, we return to Redis' character under the sea. You will notice as well, you go past like a broken child doll just to the left of him. It's easy to miss, and again, that's been glimpsed in previous trailers. Kojima himself has said, you should play all the trailers side by side to start to see the patterns, and there's already YouTube videos that are doing that. Okay, here's the most super fun bit. You fly literally through Redis' esophagus, and inside, of course, there's a black-eyed baby giving you the thumbs up. Now, the thumbs up, again, is almost like, think of this as almost like the activation of an extra life, maybe a calling to a universe. Even madder detail, Redus's windpipe has handprints on the flesh. Now, if the Stranger Things connections weren't already blazingly apparent, when Redus wakes up, you can see him literally cough out oily worms. Now, again, are these some kind of like, connective or transference issue or problem? It's in no surprise at all to see this, a deliberate reference to the Upside Down. Only a few months ago, Hideo Kojima was tweeting about watching Stranger Things, and again, he does very little accidentally. And he'd even started tweeting pictures of he'd arranged salt cellars and pepper pots at a meal he was having in a kind of symmetrical up and down arrangement, indicating a sense of reflection or transference. And when the slugs walk away, you can see they go from oily to pink, and it's almost like they're crawling along an object that isn't physically visible. And we see Redus staring at the canister. At that point, he can no longer see the baby. Where has it gone? Again, this might be interesting to tie up the various different trailers. I think the Redus staring sort of steely-eyed into the camera feels like a good point to lock the different bits of footage, and that seems to occur in at least trailers 1 and 3, and possibly 1, 2, and 3. And again, the solitary tear. Is this reflecting, the anguish he feels when he cuddles the baby and it's gone in the first trailer? To loop back round again to the first trailer, we see him now stood on like a giant crater, and in the background there's once again those 5 spectral Ludens style figures. Some people have speculated that when you actually pan into the crater, you can see like an oily impact, which if you trace around it again, looks like a hand. That's harder to prove, but it's quite an interesting and fun link. Now, if you really want to get kind of space detective on all of this, he stood on the edge of a crater. And if you reference the lyrics of the nuclear song that Mike Oldfield had done of Metal Gear Solid 5, it literally starts with the word standing on the edge of a crater. Now, I'm not saying quite literally there's a bridge between Metal Gear Solid and Death Stranding, or am I? But, hey, I think probably there's all sorts of reasons that wouldn't happen. But at the same time, if you're really going to go there, the new Metal Gear game, Survive, is literally set in an idea of wormholes and parallel universes, but I'm not really feeling capable of standing that up. I do think more it's about Kojima trying to create connections between everything, and he's always done this, where, Hideo Kojima's games don't begin the time the game comes out in the shop, they begin from the minute he announces them. The game is on, the game of interaction between player, journalist, community, Reddit, the stuff he does with Jeff Keighley. It's all part of a puzzle. It's an interconnected puzzle. All of this is about interconnectedness. Now again, we get the repetition to end of the Big Bang, and I think the fact that it almost sounds like the same bit of audio is playing twice is significant. I think for me this is almost like the state of a video game where you die and you restart, and you get that mantric sense of redeploying, and the game says the same things because that's what the game does. And I think, obviously the big mic drop at the end of it is, we've had a Big Bang, we continued, there's this Big Bang, it will be our last.
An explosion. That will be our last.
Now, as insane as this theory of Norman Reedus being quite literally like a computer game avatar sounds, consider what happened when Kojima spoke at the Tribeca Games Festival earlier this year. And he said he was quite coy around the actual plot, but he did say introducing Norman Reedus as a naked character first was intentional. He wanted people to see him without any clothes on, so they could later see him transform with different clothes, equipment and hairstyles added. Now again, in video games, that's essentially a character select screen. We create our own character. And again, Kojima not being one to say things without a bigger meaning, that feels significant. So as you can see, there's literally quite a lot of things up in the air. The plot really could swing anyway. With Kojima, it's a battle between the literal and the fantastical. It may be as obvious as it's just a sci-fi adventure crossing worlds, or it could be a metaphor on the nature of player and game, or it could be about science versus God. It could be about science versus God versus the environment. And again, this will all tie round to real-world themes. And you're talking about a creator in his early to mid-50s. He's got a statement to make. He's got an onus to his fans. He's looking to bridge a divide between, games and film, and I think again this will be really clearly evident when Death Stranding finally comes out. I think it will include elements we're familiar with, but it's definitely going to go to a place of feeling more filmic. And I think we could expect almost this sense of working together to solve puzzles, more like PT. But hey, There's a lot still up in the air. We'll see. So I really hope you've enjoyed this reaction stroke analysis. It's definitely more food for thought. Let us know what you think in the comments below, and I'll definitely be following up on Death Stranding in a much more in-depth way on Games Radar Plus soon.